And I start laughing at that moment. I'm like, what the heck? She just like read my mind. I start laughing and she keeps praying, and then my whole body starts to shake. And I start to shake and just laugh because I'm like, he's actually doing it. Like I'm actually experiencing God. And I begin to fall backwards, and there's this guy like behind me. I'm trying as hard as I can not to fall down. I'm like, I am gonna stay up unless God like shoves me down. And I'm shaking and I'm laughing, and eventually I just fall to the ground. And I just laughed. It was like all of the weight and all of the burden that I had, and all the disappointment I had through college, and all the fears I had growing up as a kid, and all of that I had my whole life was just lifted. Yeah, my name is Israel Shah, and I grew up in New Hampshire. Small town, 5,000 people, solid family. Went to a good church. As far as I could tell at that time, had good theology and like pretty good community. And the way they taught Jesus was relationship with Jesus. But it wasn't experience, and it wasn't like encountering him. And so it was a lot about like God answering prayers. And I think that's a lot of how my relationship with Jesus started, was that I would pray for things and I would see him answer them. This one time, I remember walking outside and I was gonna go play basketball. And it starts raining. And I'm like, shoot. I'm like, God, can you make it stop raining? And it stops raining. I'm like, whoa, like did God just answer me? So then I just to test it out, I pray again, like God make it start raining again, and it starts raining. I'm like, wow, like I think God's actually answering my prayer. But then I'm like, shoot, I really want to play basketball, so God make it stop raining again, and it stopped raining. So that was kind of like how my relationship with the Lord was. There'd be little moments like that, looking at the sky and pray for a shooting star, and boom, there'd be a shooting star. So started to kind of like grow in this relationship with the Lord, and along that time, this is like probably 14, 15, I'm starting to like spend more time with the Lord. I had a lot of great examples in my life. Like my mom, man, I'd wake up every morning, go downstairs, she would be by the fireplace with her Bible open and a cup of tea, like doing her devotions. So, and I've had good friends who are part of Bible studies and youth groups, and I was involved in all of that. And so my life was definitely like getting more and more towards following the Lord. But there was this gap. And the gap was that I would read stories and hear songs about experiencing God or knowing him. Like Paul says, I consider all things lost compared to the surpassing greatness of knowing Christ. And I was like, I don't know what that means. Like for me, God was just like someone who answered prayers. Like what was God by himself? I remember this song that said, we don't want blessings, we want you. And I didn't know that God. So it happened that I was in this relationship with this girl that ended up ending, and it was just like devastating for me. And when that happened, I just ran to the Lord. I remember running out in the rain to like the place where I'd spent time with the Lord, and opening the Bible to like the book of Acts, trying to find answers. Didn't really find anything there, but it started this few months of like every day after school, I would just come home, I would listen to worship music. At the time, it was like, United Pursuit, early Jesus Culture, 10th Avenue North, like these bands, and I would just listen to them, and there was something about worship that just comforted me. And I was really going after the Lord, and I remember just going to youth group, and all it felt like, though, the only answer I could think of was like, God, fix this relationship, make this relationship work. And I realized in that moment, like, man, this girl and relationships in general has become an idol for me. This is like, my only source of joy is this relationship. And I remember praying and asking God, saying, God, if you made me, you should be able to satisfy me. Like if you created me and you made my desires, you should be able to satisfy them. And it was about a week after that prayer, I'm lying in bed one night, I get a text from a friend on the basketball team, and he's like, hey bro, do you still like that girl? And I'm like, yeah, I do, but there's like nothing there anymore. And he's like, all right, just checking, because me and her started dating. And it was like, I remember in that moment, I should have been really sad. I should have been like, really like disappointed in this, but something happened in that moment. And it was like the room was filled with this beauty and this peace that I didn't know. I didn't have a lot of peace in my life at that time. But this peace filled the room, and I felt God say to my heart, I got this. I know what I'm doing with your life. And for the first time, I experienced God. And man, from that moment, like, I was like, this is what I want to do. Like, I want to know God. I want to follow him. I want to be with him. And I remember during that time, like, hearing about missions. And it just made sense to me. Like, if we can know God, and there's people who don't know God, of course, the normal thing is to tell them about him. There was a conference, actually, and they talked about this mission trip to Ecuador. This was my senior year of high school. So I signed up for that. I was like, I want to go and experience this. And another reason was, when I would read the Bible, I would see these stories of like these miracles happening. And I was like, man, I don't see this in my life. Like, if this is in the Bible and it's not in my life, either this book isn't true or I'm doing something wrong. But I would hear these testimonies from missionaries of like God healing people and like appearing to people in dreams. And I was like, this is crazy. This is like stuff in the Bible. So that's where God is. That's where I want to go. I ended up going to Ecuador, and it was this amazing experience of seeing people get healed, seeing people get saved off of like terrible messages by 18-year-olds. Like, these weren't great messages, but these people were getting saved. And even more than that, it was just the intimacy with Jesus. I can remember lying on the roof, looking up at the stars in Ecuador, and being like, God, like, this is what I want to do. Like, wherever you want to go, I want to be with you. So after that, I go to college, and man, college was hard. Like, I mean, people go to college to get a great education and like pursue their careers. At that time, I was just going to bring revival. I was like, I want to see people get saved. I want to see like revival happen on my university. And I didn't. And I mean, there probably was other people there that cared about that, but I didn't meet them. I was like the only person there, I felt like, that really cared about this stuff. And I was really discouraged and really disappointed. And I started to feel a lot of shame. I started to feel like a failure. And I started to feel like, you know, God was probably really disappointed in me that I had said I was going to do this and, you know, wasn't seeing it happen. And I mean, I had moments in college of like experiencing the Lord, like different like fall retreats with my campus, or like different church services. I would have these brief moments, but it was always kind of like I would have this glimpse of God's goodness. And then I would go back to college, and I would go back to like trying to serve him, and I would have nothing. And it was like I was trying to give people something that I didn't have. And I realized, like, I can't do this anymore. I can't keep going and trying to like change people and offer something that I'm not even living in. Like I'm trying to convince them of this life that's so great, and for me it's miserable. So I knew I needed something more. I knew I needed some sort of healing. And what I went to was, a lot of my friends had gone and done this mission program, YWAM, Youth with a Mission. A lot of my friends had done that in Kona, Hawaii. And I remember these friends because they seemed like they were free, and they seemed to like really believe what they talked about. And I was like, man, I need freedom. If I'm gonna like continue to follow Jesus and continue to like try to bring his kingdom, like I gotta know him, and I gotta really like experience him and get some healing. So after college, I went to YWAM to do a discipleship training school. It's 3 months of like learning about God, getting to know him, getting to know what he thinks about us, and then 3 months of outreach going to the nations. And I got there and I was hungry. Man, I was hungry, and I was learning all this great stuff and these amazing lessons. But I was like, these lessons are great, but a lot of them I've heard, a lot of them I know. I need to experience God. I need to like get to know him more than I have before. And a lot of my friends were having like these crazy encounters with God, having like these visions, having like falling over because of the presence of God, and I was feeling nothing. And I remember one night, this is like 8 weeks in, and I've learned so much, and there's so much like healing that's happening in my heart, but I was like, man, I need to experience God. And the thing is, before I even left, and before I got here, I had this dream. And in this dream, I was in YWAM, in Hawaii. And in the dream, I'm looking up at the stars, and I'm saying, God, I've left everything for you. What else do you want? God, I'll even break up with my girlfriend if you want me to. And then in the dream, I realized I didn't have a girlfriend. So I was like, there's nothing left. Like, I've given everything. Where are you? In this like desperate place of like needing God. So fast forward a few months later, I'm in YWAM. It's 8 weeks after being there. And I'm in a very similar place where I'm like, I'm not experiencing God. And I remember they have like this prayer room where they do worship. And this particular night, like the Holy Spirit came. And there are people shaking and laughing and experiencing God in profound ways. And I hear about this, so I go into the prayer room and I look around, and it's like wild. I'm like, wow, like this is profound. And people start praying for me, and I don't feel anything. And I'm in there for like hours, like wanting to experience God. And I leave the prayer room and I go outside and I look at the stars and I remember that dream, and I'm in that same place. I'm like, God, I've left everything for you. Like, what more do I have to do? And that whole time I'm like trying to think the right thoughts. I'm trying to like be positive. I'm trying to like get myself to a place of encountering God, and I can't do it. And I go back in the prayer room and I just sit on the floor. And just in this really honest place, I'm like, God, I want you. Like, I just want you. And at this point, like, it's most of the people are gone. There's only like a few people left in there. And someone comes over to me and says, hey, can I pray for you? And a lot of people had prayed for me. So I'm like, yeah, sure, you can pray for me. So I stand up and she starts to pray for me. And she starts praying and says, God, he's been waiting for you, and he won't leave until he gets you. And as she's praying, I start to like feel my heart start to pound, and I start to feel something inside of me. And she's praying like quite loudly and keeps praying. And as she's praying, it's just like, I don't know what I'm feeling, but like my hand starts to shake. And I'm like, oh my gosh, like, is this God? And I'm thinking in my head, well, God, if this is you, like, you're going to have to do better than that. And then right then, the person praying for me laughs out loud. And she says, God, he says you're going to have to do better than that. And I start laughing at that moment. I'm like, what the heck? She just like read my mind. I start laughing and she keeps praying. And then my whole body starts to shake. And I start to shake and just laugh because I'm like, he's actually doing it. Like, I'm actually experiencing God. And I begin to fall backwards, and there's this guy like behind me. I'm trying as hard as I can not to fall down. I'm like, I am gonna stay up unless God like shoves me down. And I'm shaking and I'm laughing, and eventually I just fall to the ground. And I just laughed. It was like all of the weight and all of the burden that I had, and all the disappointment I had through college, and all the fears I had growing up as a kid, and all of that I had my whole life was just lifted. And I was like free. And God was real, and he was with me. And I don't know how long I was in there. It was like over an hour of me laying on the ground laughing. And by the time I get up, there's no one in there except for the guy who had caught me. And he helps me to my room, and I like go to bed laughing and like wake up in the morning with that same like lightheartedness. And I remember just going to the Lord, and I'm like, God, why did you do that? Like, what am I supposed to learn? What's the lesson I'm supposed to learn from this? You didn't say anything to me. What did you want to do? And I felt him say in my heart, like, I didn't want to teach you a lesson. I just wanted to be with you. And I remember that, like, my life was different after that. I remember I would read the Bible, and before it was always like, okay, what lesson do I have to learn? How do I have to change my life? After that, I would read it, and it just tasted good. I was like, man, Jesus is so beautiful. I love hearing about him. I love reading this story. And like, I went back to Boston where I was living at the time, where I had gone to college. And all of the stuff that was so hard, and all of the stuff that was so heavy and burdensome, like trying to tell people about Jesus and praying for people, all that stuff that I felt so insecure about. I remember just like walking down the street and seeing someone with like a cast on and being like, hey, can I pray for you? Like, I follow Jesus and I know he wants to heal people. And all of the burden was gone from this encounter I had with the Holy Spirit, where he said, like, I just want to be with you. Man, and I think of verses where it says, like, we can only love him because he first loved us. And where it says, like, if you want to bear much fruit, abide in me. Like, that's it. You want the secret to bring in revival. You want the secret to go in and change in the world. It's not try harder. It's abide. Abide in me. A lot of like the fear and stuff I experienced was at night. Like, I would wake up at night and just have a ton of fear. I had a lot of bad dreams. In college, it got pretty bad with like sleep paralysis and a lot of anxiety and a lot of just dark dreams and stuff. And I can remember after experiencing the Lord, and during that time of really getting to know the Lord and experiencing the Holy Spirit, I started to have these dreams where I would cast demons out of people. So there was this change of like me dreaming that demons were attacking me to me dreaming that other people had demons, and I would like pray for them. Or like I would hear about demons and I would go after it. When I was in Egypt, when I was in my mission trip in Egypt, I remember having this dream, and in the dream there was 7 demons around the room. 7, 14, whatever. There was a very specific number of demons around our place. I remember just waking up and like praying for this. So I started to have these dreams about demons, but rather than me being oppressed, I was like fighting against them. So like at that point, it's kind of like, oh, this is interesting. I'm having these dreams, but it didn't really like, is it real? Is there anything going on or not? I don't know. But I knew that I was like feeling more free and better about it. So I'm back in Boston after doing my discipleship training school with YWAM, and there's this guy who comes into our Bible study, and come to find out that was his first time going to anything like that. He was not a Christian a day before, but he was homeless at the time. He was like this super smart kid, and kind of left his parents and was like sleeping at a WeWork, working on this startup, and ended up getting kicked out because you're not supposed to sleep at a WeWork. So he's sleeping at his friend's house, and his friend went to our Bible study, and his friend tells him, he's like, bro, your life kind of sucks. You should pray. So he prays and he experiences God. And he's like, oh wow, God's real. Like, that's simple. So then he comes to our Bible study. And we hear about this, and we start like talking to him and telling him like kind of like the gospel. And he's just super receptive and wants to follow Jesus. But he doesn't have anywhere to live. He's like sleeping at his friend's place. So where we were, it's like a Christian community house, and we had a space for him. So he would sleep next to my bed. I remember the first night we're sleeping together. He's sleeping on the floor, I'm on the bed. And I have this dream. And in the dream, I look over at him, and his face is like all distorted, and it's like super dark, super demonic. So I start praying for him, and I wake up like drenched in sweat. And then in the morning, I see him, and he tells me, he's like, bro, I had the craziest dream last night that God and Satan were fighting over my soul. And I'm like, well, that's super intense, because I had this dream that I was praying for you, and you had a demon. And after that, he got really sick, like super sick, conjunctivitis in both eyes. And like for like 2 weeks, he was very sick, and we would just like pray for him all the time. This kid, just after that, he became one of the most passionate followers of Jesus I knew. Ended up becoming like full-time missionary in China, and was there until during COVID. He moved back and is still doing wild mission stuff now in Boston. And it was just this crazy thing of this story of kind of like me being used to be attacked by these dark forces at night, to me actually like having dreams of overcoming them, to me like helping to see this other kid get set free. So yeah, so that's my story. That's how it happened. And